Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And I was supposed to be playing a big old game today, and it got canceled. So the person who's going to come over was unable to make it. So I've just cleared the game. And as I'm going through my stacks here, I thought, I'm going to answer the question that comes up a lot on my channel. And people ask me, what's your favorite game? And so there's a few criteria that I have. And so I'll lay those out, and then we'll go through my games. And I've got a lot of them, and I've played a lot of them, and some of them I've played a lot more than others. But simply, there's a few criteria, and I think a lot of people would agree with this. I mean, if you got a bunch of friends over, it's a Saturday night, you kind of having fun. The husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, they're all there. You're probably gonna play like something that's a crowd pleaser game. You're probably not going to haul out, Global 40 or Global War 36 or something. You're probably going to haul out categories or Cards Against Humanity or something like that. That's not really my jam, but I'm going to go through and tell you what my games are that I like. Now, the scoring system I have is pretty simple. It's going to be how much time do I have? How many people are involved? And what is the theme? And so that's going to be how we do this. So I am going to go through, and these are in no particular order as I go through. And then I'm going to add up the score at the end and give you my top 10. All right, without any further ado, let's begin. All right, the first game we're going to talk about here is the American Civil War by Eagle Games. This, as it says here, an epic game of grand strategy. And when this came out, it really was. Nowadays, not so much, because games have become more complex and more epic. But this is a fantastic game, and it is right there, one of my favorite games depicting the American Civil War of all time. And I bought this. It was like $100 when I bought it, which was a fortune when I bought it. Nowadays, $100, that's pretty typical. And so what I love about this game, first of all, are the minis. Eagle Games, I think they had a really good idea. We're going to actually build all this stuff kind of to scale. And you had to put the cavalry or the artillery together. And the cavalry, you get the elite or the black horses, and the regular cavalry, the brown little riders just come on and off. You also could have the British and the French come in, intervention from Europe, come in and on the side of the south. And there's the north, and some more elite horses there. And the only problem with this game that we all saw as soon as we set it up is the board. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but I will show you the board. Oh, that's upside down, so I'm just going to flip this over. This is the board, and you play right here. So all this other stuff, and this is 3 big panels. Like, this is a very large board. Here's one of the panels right here. This is just one. Right, it's the width of the box, and there's 3 of them. And you literally play on maybe 1/5 of the board. So they've got a couple of charts here, and they got another chart down here, and then they got the turn order up here. And it says 384 pieces. Not exactly true, because the artillery takes 3 pieces to put together. So you got about 50 of those, but whatever. It's still a gorgeous game. Really, really well made. But they did skimp out on a few things. Like, there's no markers for any of these. Right? They don't have any time markers. There's no rail stock, European intervention, the Navy. Nothing like that. You just bring your own. So I use mine from HBG to kind of flesh it out and make it look good. All right. So the thing I like about this is as you play the advanced rules, there's 3 different rules. You got your base and standard and advanced. And the advanced rules use the standard, just kind of pump it up. But the thing I like about it is you really dive into the strategy of moving your stuff around. And then when you go to do an actual battle, when you have a larger group, at least 6 units on each side, you dive right in here. And it was so much fun moving stuff around. Basically, you're trying to make one of these fold for the other guys, so they have nothing left in the middle or the left or the middle of the center or the middle of their right. And if you do that, then you can run them down with your cavalry and get some more hits on them. You can steal cannons and everything. So it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool that way. I really love it. So the upside is the depth that you get into using plastic minis. There are definitely deeper Civil War games. This one here is very accessible though. So it's quite easy to play once you get into it. The downside, depending on the people you're playing with, is there are some little nitpicky rules here and there that can kind of tilt some balance every now and again. That might go well for you one moment, might not go well for you the next. So it's a little unsettling if you're playing with people who don't like the whole kick them when they're down, especially when you're running after them to hack them to shreds with your cavalry after you've broken through their flanks. The other thing is the space you need. You need a really large table or a couple of tables to play. And the other thing is the time. The time that you have to set aside to play this game is quite a bit. I forget exactly how long they said on the box. I don't even think they say on the box. Yeah. But it takes a while. Maybe that's why they didn't put it on the box. Yeah, but it's strongly a two-player game. They say you can play with 4, but it's strongly a two-player game. And you have probably, at the minimum, 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours, just to really get into it. And even then, you might not be done. So you start here in June of 1861. I'm going to turn on a little bit of light here. So in June of 1861 is when you start. And then you start June, you do a build, you go along and you add more and more stuff, and then you go to 62, 63, 64, 65. And there is a very odd victory condition, 2 victory conditions for the North in this game. And one is that they have to occupy all the cities in the South, and the South, and the North also has to engage them in a major battle after, I believe it's July of 64. So if you can't engage them in a battle in July, maybe it's June, July, August, September of 64, the South wins. So the South when we played, the South would win a lot of games because they just moved the guys around until there's only 5 in each, right? There's only five guys in each, so you can never force a major battle, so you win. You can exit the cities, you don't care about anything, and off you go, right? So we thought that was kind of weird, so we voted to ditch that rule. So that's the other thing, is that how are the rules in a game, all right? So you've got the time, you've got the people you're playing with, how easy is it for them to learn, and you've got the theme. And the other thing is, of course, is it easy to play? Is the rule book easy to play? And for the most part, the rule book is fairly simple. It even says here, easy to play basic rules. And you do sink into the reality of things, although all the rail stock and the naval rating stuff, that's all done very abstractly. I'd love to have had some places out here and places for your boats to go up the rivers, but they didn't include that, which is unfortunate because that was a pretty major part of a number of sieges. So Vicksburg being one of the most famous. But overall, this game is really fantastic. So for the amount of time it takes on a scale of 1 to 10, I got to give it about a 6. Okay, because it does take quite a bit of time. The rules are actually fairly easy when you get into it. Once you start playing it, it does become rather repetitious. So I'm going to give the rules an 8. Thematically, I'm going to give it a 9. It's the abstract stuff that they lose a mark on. And for the size of the board and the amount of play space, I'm going to give it a 6. Okay, so that's my score for the American Civil War. All right, so here we have Supremacy, and this is a game that I purchased way back in 1989, and this is quite a game. This is quite a game. Now, it's called Supremacy, the Game of the Superpowers. So it's a 6-player game, fashioned after the idea of Risk as far as the map goes, but including, of course, some naval zones. And then you have here the components, squares for the armies and the oblongs for the navies. Pretty simple. And everybody gets their own little card here, and you put your little markers on here to say, you know, how much grain you've got, how much oil, how much minerals, and then you use these to build things, to move, and to do battle. All right, and you have resource cards here, and there's one resource card for each. And I know they came out with an alternate set of cards because people started to know the cards that you really want to have, right? So you say, oh, I really need to get this place because it's got this stuff in it. So it became, I can't remember exactly what happened, but Arabia, of course, Saudi Arabia is going to have a lot of oil. So 5 oil, that's the most you can have, right? And maybe in the new deck, it didn't have any oil, but it had grain or minerals or something. So you had to kind of change up your strategy. But the idea is that it is a war game, but they kind of lose their way a little bit because they've also got the market. Now, yes, economics are huge in war. I get that. But when you haul out a game and you just want to play and there's nukes, right? There's little nukes. We're going to nuke Western Canada there. And, this was the weakest part of the game in my mind because it just relies on a die roll. So if you want to do something, everybody rolls a die. Whoever rolls the die highest gets to either buy or sell first. So I'm going to use the nuke marker on grain here. So if grain is worth $100 million and you want to buy some, then you could buy, and for every one you buy, this would go up one. So if you buy, 10, it goes from 100 million to $1 billion. Now anybody who wants to buy grain has to spend $1 billion for one grain. And so you could really, if you got a good die roll, you could really screw with the market. And conversely, if you're selling, right, and it's $1 billion, and you have 5 grain you want to sell, you sell 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now somebody's making half, and when they sell 1, 2, 3, and somebody else sells, by the time you're the last person, you can't sell. So it was really frustrating when you got some bad die rolls. So we had limits of how far this could move with each player. I think we set a limit of 3 spaces it could move. You could buy and sell as many as you wanted, but it would only ever move 3 in that direction. So we had to house rule that one. There are nukes, right? Nukes cost $500 million, and mineral and L stars you could shoot down the nukes, but you have to go through and find them first. You would say, I'm looking to build L stars, and then you'd flip, like you shuffle the deck each time, and then flip, and by the time you get to the L stars, you have to pay quite a bit. I forget how much it was, 200 million per card, I think, yeah. So 200 million bucks per card to get L stars or nukes, okay? Pretty crazy stuff. And you had to keep your armies and navies, you had to pay for them, right? And so these are companies. You had to pay 50 million per company, and so you hope that they're making stuff that you can sell and then pay, right? So it turned into more of a game of economics, is what I'm trying to say. And when you look at the thing here, there's not much on here that talks about money, right? That's all bang bang, right? There's no money. And so when we played it, we were like, okay, it's good. And I do enjoy it, but it does fall short thematically a little bit. And of course, it's the 80s, so, the components aren't quite, not like the American Civil War components, and components drive a theme. These were the things we were most excited about, were these nukes. All right, the mushroom clouds. So, what score does Supremacy get? Well, I gave it, for time, I gave it a 7 because you can rip through it in 3 to 4 hours. Not really a problem. The ease of just opening up and starting to play, pretty good. It is a pretty thick rule book here, but there's a lot of dead space. There's a lot of white space, and then there's a lot of tips and things that they tell you of how to do things, okay? And, of course, you got pages to put on your own notes, stuff like this. So it's only honestly, about 20 pages of rules. So it's not terribly bad. So the ease of this, I gave it an 8. For the space you need, I also gave it an 8. You do need a decent sized table because you need your table, and then everybody gets one of these. So playing a 6-player game, well, you'll have people on each end and 2 people on the side. So you do need some decent space. Plus, you got to roll your dice. For the theme and the components, that took a bit of a beating. I'm only going to give it a 5 because you just don't do as much fighting as the box suggests. But still fun, but you do have to house rule the market. I highly recommend it. All right, so that's it for Supremacy. All right, this is one of my favorite games, and it is a really simple game. Came out back in the late 80s, and yeah, modern naval battles. And very simply, you start with a fleet of 7 boats. So you've got 6 surface and then 1 sub. If you play straight out of the box, you could get 7 subs, right? You just randomly deal out the fleets to each person. But I thought I'd show you what you got here. So we've got couple of frigates up here and a little guided missile destroyer kind of guy here. Is a cruiser, got your battleship, of course, cruiser, and of course the venerable aircraft carrier. And of course we've got a submarine here as well. And it's a very simple game, and the only dice you have is this one. But this one dice can really ruin your day. Because you start out, everybody, on the start of your turn, you roll, and I rolled a 6. It means I could do 6 attacks. And attacks are all red cards, and you got to have your different bases here. So if I've got a gun attack with a 5-inch gun, that would come off of this thing. And if I had another 5-inch gun, I wouldn't be able to shoot it, because guns can only fire from the front row. And then I got a missile attack with an A missile, so that would come off the broadsword, right? And you just designate other ships, because there's other ships. Each person has this fleet, and you hit it. So you can see how many points of damage each of these things can take. So 5, 3, 6, 10, 5, and 12. And most of them just sink, right? When you get 3 on the broadsword, it's blank on the back, and you hand it over to the person. They just got 3 points or 5 points. Virginia, same thing. But things, when you have capital ships, so you've got the New Jersey. So after you've hit it for your 9 damage, because it can take 10, you'd flip it over and it's down to 1. Same with the Nimitz. It can take 12. So once you get 11, you flip it over, it's down to 1. And yeah, next hit, the person gets it. Ticonderoga doesn't have that, but it's worth 14 points. So you want to try to protect that. And they do have anti-air, which is really good, because there are airstrikes that can come in, come off the carrier, or they can come off cards. All right. And it's just a lot of fun, and it's the ultimate kick 'em when he's down game, because once somebody is, you've peeled off all the cheap, well, that's not really cheap, but you peel off the cheap stuff. Maybe it's like this, the submarine's gone, and the guy's sitting here like this, and he doesn't have any cards left, because, you use all your cards in defense. He's sitting here, he's got no cards in his hand. You're absolutely going to be attacking this fleet. So don't play with people that whine, right? Because you absolutely don't want to have that happen. But I love this. It's Modern Naval Battles. It was re-released as Modern Naval Battles as a different game. I actually bought that game, but it is all completely symbol-based game. So if you've ever played something like Galaxy Trucker or something like that, it's very similar, where everything is based on symbols. So, Modern Naval Battles. A lot of fun. Plays pretty quickly. So, the time, you can play one round in 10 minutes, no problem. And then you typically reshuffle and set and play like a round of 3. and you get to try different fleets out and whatnot. So the time for this one, I'm going to give it a 9. Okay, very fast playing, but one game isn't enough. You do have to put in more. So I'm going to give it a 9 because you can control that. The ease of learning it, usually we teach people and kind of teach them as their turn is going along. There are some nuances to it that you do have to figure out, but the ease, I'm going to give it an 8. The space that you just need a typical table. Don't need a lot of room. So I'm going to give that a 9. You can't play it off your lap, but you can play it on a typical dining room table, no problem. The components and the theme. Well, the theme is pretty strong, but there's no actual boats, right? There's no actual planes. It's all just card-based, abstract, lots of abstract stuff. Everything in the air is abstract, of course. So not real strong there. Just an enjoyable game, though, but I'm only going to give it a 6 for theme and the components. So there you go. Modern naval battles. It is a lot of fun. Okay, quick addendum to the modern naval battles. I've actually lowered the theme from a 6 down to a 4. And the reason why is, you can be all these nations. And in the upgrades, I've got 2 expansions for this. Modern Naval Battles 2 and Modern Naval Battles 3. And so you have Japanese ships and Italian ships and, right, all that kind of stuff comes into it. And it's like, you're not really, the West versus the East on this, or NATO versus Warsaw Pact or something. You could try to set it up like that, but the Russians wouldn't stand a chance. The American stuff is just too good. So I'm going to have to drop it down to a 4. Okay, on we go. Alright, this is a small game. It's 2-player only. It's just called Cold War, the CIA versus KGB. I've had this one for about 25 years now, and I really, really, really like it. It's so much fun. And simply, you take one side, the CIA or the KGB, and you are trying to win these objectives. And you keep score. They're each worth certain numbers of points. You keep scoring little cards. And, you start at 0 and you work your way up. And you get to 100 and you win. Pretty simple. They got nice little, they're good components actually, right? The glass and these are really good plastic chips. And the cards are all nicely laminated, but that's it. It's just a card-driven game. So essentially you get some cards in your hand, you draw and you play, you draw, you play, you draw, you play. And essentially you're trying to win. There are some nuances to the game that you learn as you go through it. And yeah, you got to have some self-control though, because if you go over, then the person you used gets killed. So if you're using the director, Preston Stockwell, and he goes over, well, he's dead. Right? You also have assassins. So the CIA has this assassin, John Kruger, which I believe is the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Eraser. I believe so. So there you go. The assassin for the Soviets, of course, is a female. Right? Look at that. Looks good kill, huh? And the idea is just to get to 100 points. It's a lot of fun, and I honestly, I get such a kick out of it because you will have hands that go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until it's actually impossible to draw a card. And to me, that's a sign of a good game. They also do have some that are just a single draw. It's a single draw of the card. Should have gotten one out before I started. Like the Olympics and various other things where you just have one draw of a card. So here's nuclear escalation. You just draw a card and whoever is highest on there, you get it, you win. So a lot of fun. Again, a lot of nuances to it and you learn it as you go. But as far as the time goes, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to play, as small as it looks here. 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to give that an 8. The ease of learning, to get right into it is not too difficult. But to actually get good at this game takes a while. So I'm going to give that a 7. And for space, don't need a lot of space. Just right in front of you, play off your table again. So space, I can give it a 9, just on your table, no problem. And the components and the theme is actually very rich. The photographs they have here are all people that you probably recognize if you studied the Cold War. So it's Ho Chi Minh, and I believe that's Jap, I think so. You got Idi Amin, you got Fidel Castro. I forget him. He's Kingdom Saudi Arabia there. You got Shea, of course. I believe they've actually got, what's her name? Jane Fonda. Right? So they got some very interesting things. They've got some news pictures. Mother Teresa there. Lech Walesa, I believe, is there. So all this kind of stuff. The Mafia. So I'm not sure who that is. If you guys know, let me know. But you do actually kind of get that feel that you're trying to outwit your opponent. So I think thematically, and again, the components, they didn't chintz on the components, right? So it's not this little cardboard thing, it's little glass things, and these are very heavy and well done. So I'm going to give it a 9. Okay, so there you go. That's my scoring for the Cold War. The next offering is Attack, again by Eagle Games, and depending on who you're playing with, wow, this can really be a fantastic game. I'm not going to pull everything out of here and the map and everything, but it's pretty standard global map, nothing too spectacular to it. And the thing about this game is that it mixes politics, economics, and war all together. So it does that pretty well. Again, looking at the map here, you get a sense of war. Like it's just war. But politics, economics, technology, espionage, all of that are included. So, and it's kind of set in the 1940s, right? As though World War II were just going on and everybody's attacking everybody else. And it's basically a game of ideologues. Not a game of warriors. So the units here are pretty typical things. I thought I had actually grabbed a large soldier there, but I just grabbed a regular size. So essentially, you see the 2 tanks here and the 2 artillery. You got a small one that's worth 1. You got a big one's worth 5. So instead of using chips, they just molded bigger ones. Tanks, of course. And in the original, if you just buy Attack, which this is not it. This is with the deluxe expansion. I've got 2 copies of this actually for some reason. But in the original, there's no boats. It's just done with cards. But in this one here, you actually get to have your little fleets go around and make a difference. So only 4 boats though: carrier, battleship, destroyer, sub. And it's a big game of rock, paper, scissors with these. So that's kind of fun. Each territory ends up, you get a card, and depending on how much stuff you have to fight, it tells you what it's going to be worth. So this is the lowest one here. You have other ones that give you minerals and oil is the key. There's propaganda, different technologies that you can use, that you can get as well. Economics cards are all these ones. So, and they give you paper money, which we never use. We always use our chips from HBG. But this game, when you can get a bunch of guys together and play, I don't know if you have a group of 5 or 6 people that would love to play a big game, you just dive right into. This is the game for you. This Attack, and get the deluxe, get the expansion. If you can't get deluxe, just get the one that says expansion on it. I believe this is the original, and this is what it is. Again, doesn't that just look like war, but there's so much more to it. Okay, so with Attack, I'm going to have to give Attack for time. Takes a while, and the time is going to be about a 6. So it's another Eagle game like American Civil War, and I gave that a 6 for time as well. The ease of learning, it's not easy to learn. Once you're in, it's not too bad, but there are a number of nuances to this game, not the least of which are the technology cards and the different ideologies that you have. Looking on the back here, you see communism, democracy, monarchy, and fascism. And yeah, here's the military units and how they move and the things they do. But it's funny how there are very few actual battles in this game compared to what you think there would be. Just very few. You tend to do a lot of maneuvering, and then you have a big battle. Might have little skirmishes, but when you have big battles, yeah. The way they do battling too, you've got to really work at figuring that out pre-battle, like whether or not I should go into this, and that takes some time. So the ease of this it's not really easy. I'm going to give it a 5. Speaking from experience, where I didn't know we could do that. All right, space. You need a lot of space. I'm going to match it with the American Civil War and give it a 6. But the themes and the components, I think it actually captures it pretty well. Although, again, it does look like, it's world conquest makes you think, risk, it's what we're going to do. We're going to roll dice and kill things, which you do. But it's much more about the economics. You got to have good economics to get success here. So for the components and the theme, I'm going to give it a 7. All right. There we go. That is Attack. All right, next in the lineup is Mare Nostrum. Mare Nostrum I got to play about 20 years ago, and it very quickly became one of my favorites. So I went and bought my own copy, and I have yet to play it. I bought this one just a couple years ago. I usually have friends who own it, so I just love this game though. It's a lot of fun. As you can see, it's in the Mediterranean, and very, very fun game. You got to play again with people who don't mind getting attacked, right, or getting picked on, because again, you'll probably go after the people who might not be able to put up as much of a stink. But there is a lot of politics in this game. So you got to get along with people. You just can't be a jerk and win. It's pretty difficult because people just will not treat you well. So there are all these different commodities that you see around here. Here's pottery. I haven't opened up the deck yet. I'm not going to right now. Everybody gets a starting card. And buy the expansion, by the way. The expansion actually is a lot of fun too. Adds some mythological creatures to everybody. So this is just the basic game that I'm showing you right now. I do have the expansion, but I didn't want to haul it out right now. It's the mythology expansion. But everybody gets a hero, and you're told where you set up and what you have there. And essentially, it's an economics game, and every now and again, you're going to roll dice for war. Not a war game. This is definitely a building game. You are trying to build up and get points. Once you get enough points, you win the game. And again, so much fun. Not very difficult to get into. The rule book is this. Now, this is not with the mythology expansion, but after they give you the setup, there's an advanced setup, which is 1 paragraph. There you go, you're done. That's the whole thing, ending game right there. The rest of this is just Q&A, right? And they tell you all the different cards. But the actual rules of this game are a page and a half. This game is driven by the players. It's not driven by the rule book. So the players really get to decide the flow of the game, how the game is feeling for everybody, how quickly it plays, and all the rest. So it is a fun game, but you do have to play with people who are willing to think, and think quickly. You don't want the people who hum and haw. So again, depending on the people you play with. And all these scores that I'm giving this, all of these games, I'm playing with people who want to play the game and want to play it correctly. So if you had a bad experience and you're saying, oh, that game, I can't believe he gave attack that much. It was terrible when we played it. Well, think about why it was terrible. And I think it usually comes down to the players who kind of wreck the game, because I don't know any of these games that I'm going to be showing you are terrible. They're all great when played correctly. So after that little aside, the time for Mare Nostrum, the base game is not very long at all. Mythology adds a little bit of time to it because it adds some steps. But it's not terrible. It's not really fast playing. I'm going to give it a 7. Give it about 3 hours and you should be good. The ease of getting into it is really strong. I'm going to give it a 9. Just to start playing. Like I say, the rule book is just go. Right? Everybody collect cards and then trade them. Oh, okay. There's a process, of course, but it's pretty much that simple. The space, yeah, you need a bit of space, especially if you get the expansion, because the expansion attaches Iberia over here and some more of Northwest Africa. But it's not terrible. I'm going to give it a 7 for space. And the components and the theme, well, all the components are wood. All right. They're pretty simple. Nothing too outlandish. And yeah, pretty simple things. So I'm going to say that it is about I'll give it a 7 for theme. I mean, the board is good thematically. But again, you're trying to capture a lot of things in this. Economics, trade, movement, warfare, a lot of things. And you're still trying to, please the gods at the same time. And there's heroes and generals and things that help you out. So, but it's pretty good. Pretty good game. I do enjoy it. If you play with the right people, you'll have a great time. If you play Advanced Civ, it's the exact opposite for the trading. In Advanced Civ, you're trying to get 5 or 6 or 7 of a kind. In this game, you're trying to get different ones. And once you get all the different ones, then you can win the game. So, similar to Advanced Civ with the trading and the location, but flip the way you collect resources. Okay, that's it for Mare Nostrum. The next game on the list is a GMT offering called Twilight Struggle, and I'm sure many of you have played it. And this is about the Cold War, and this is likely one of the most intricate, frustrating, and lovable games out there when it comes to the 20th century. It's unbelievably well done. It's a card-driven game. And it's all about influence. So you got these influence markers. It comes with cardboard ones. I've got the nice plastic ones. I actually picked these up from Doug Friend at HBG. He had an extra set of them and said, "Do you play?" I said, "Absolutely do." So there you go. And you just put your influence down and there's scoring. I'm not going to get into the game that way, but the cards allow you to shift influence in the different areas of the world. So you got South America, Central America, Africa, Europe, Asia, and then you have Southeast Asia as well, and then the Middle East. And depending on what time of the Cold War you're in, various places will score more frequently or have more to do than in others. So for instance, right after World War II, of course, Europe and Asia are going to be, a problem. You want to keep things going there. But South America, you don't really care about. Central America, you don't really care about. You're not going to be scoring them anytime soon. So you just basically play cards and shift influence around. There are some things that you also do. The space race, try to get some bonuses for the space race. That one is incredibly fun if it goes well for you, and maddening if it doesn't. It's a simple game of once you're up by 20 points, you win. So it starts here. Typically, in the early rounds, the USSR goes up pretty quickly. It's got a few good events that typically happen. And then NATO kind of rights the ship. And then you kind of go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. and then at some point somebody just takes off and wins. It's so crazy. There are a couple of charts here that are very important. You have to do these military operations, so you have to actually do some coups or do some things that are considered military operations in order to move this up. You gotta do 5 per round, and then the difference in you and your opponent is what gets put here. So if I'm the USSR and I've done 5, and you're the US and you have done 3, I'd get 2 points. So you'd move this up 2 spots, right? The DEFCON one is very important, and I've won and lost games on this chart. If you ever get to DEFCON 1, you lose. If you're the person who's played a card that makes the DEFCON status go to 1, you lose the game immediately. It's over. And I have had that happen to me. I've done it to other people. They've done it to me. So, yeah, be very careful. You keep an eye on this, okay? Keep an eye on this. If it's ever here, just say yes to the Olympics. Trust me on this one. It is, again, it's probably one of the best games out there for 2 players that is very, very thematic. Okay. So the time this takes, you better set aside some good time for it. Typically 3 to 5 hours, depending on who you're playing with. Some people really hum and haw. Other people like me, I just play the card. Let's see what happens typically. But some people just have to win, and so it takes a little longer for them. So time, I'm going to give it what I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it a 7. For ease, this is not an easy game, folks. This is not an easy game. Once you're into it, once you've played it a few times, yeah, okay, you got it, and off you go. But it's not easy to get into. I'm going to give it a 4 for ease. It's a very complex game, but that's what it was meant to be. All right, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. This is probably one of my top 2 non-war games. I don't consider this a war game, even though it's the Cold War out there. And the next one is, I'll tell you my next favorite in a minute. For space, yeah, you don't need a ton of space. A typical dining room table should do it. So I'm going to give that an 8. Not a problem there. And the components and the theme, again, it comes with cardboard components. Not a big fan of those, but when you get the upgrades, it's pretty nice. But I'm going to do with what they give you. The theme is definitely a 10 out of 10. You cannot do better than that. All the photos that they give you are straight out of war magazines. Everything is, not war, but newspapers, right? Everything that you see just makes, it just brings you right in. So I give it a 10 out of 10 on the theme. But the components that you come with, that come with the cards are great, but yeah, other than that. So I'm going to have to drop it down to 9 based on the cardboard components. I hate to be so trivial, but I think it's important in the game for it to look good the whole time. All right, there you go. Twilight Struggle. Okay, so this is the other favorite 2-player game I have that's, again, not Axis and Allies or HBG sourced. So this is Star Wars Rebellion. Fantasy Flight Games put this out a number of years ago. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, the sculpts are just fantastic for everything here. You recognize them right out of the movies, right? Shield generator and the ion cannon from Hoth. The Mon Calamari heavy cruisers here. Yeah, your corvettes, blockade runners, your rebel ships. The X-Wings, of course. There's also Y-Wings. I didn't pull everything out. Snow speeders. You got your TIE fighters, of course. Your ATSTs. Of course, you get the AT-ATs. I mean, come on, forget about them. Look at that. And Star Destroyers and the Super Star Destroyer, as they call them in the rules. And of course, the Death Star. You start with one Death Star, and you can construct a second Death Star. So that's really cool. That's a lot of fun putting that together. Now, the idea is that the rebels, they're going to have a secret hidden base. There are cards for each of the systems. And so you pull one at the beginning of you choose one at the beginning of the game and say that's going to be the rebel base. And, you plant your stuff on it and, a few units and whatnot. And then you are being hunted. So the Empire's out there trying to find you. And the way they find you is by moving into the system. And you have to say, yes, we're on that planet. Now, you have 16 rounds 14 rounds actually, in order to win. This is where you start with the token. But as time goes on, that can expand. The Empire can get more time, or this can actually start to lose. Meanwhile, the turn tracker is moving this way. And when the two meet, that's the end of the game. And this game is very well designed that typically it does come down to that last round, just before the two markers meet, that the Empire gets one shot at the rebel base. But the rebel base, it's kind of like trying to grab Jello. As Leia said, the more you tighten your grasp, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. And that's exactly what happens, is that when the Empire goes to these different places, and then they try to grab the rebel base, or they find out it's there, but they don't have enough stuff to attack it, they bring stuff over. Meanwhile, the rebel base moves. And so the Empire has to be pretty mobile, and there is always limitations on movements. So, for both. Now, you also have your heroes. You start with a few heroes, but you can add some as you go. So, of course, you got your Han Solo. Chewbacca's in there as well. You got It's a Trap over here, Admiral Akbar. This is the all grown up Luke, okay, as he's a Jedi. You also have the teenager Luke. He's not quite nearly as good. Obi-Wan. Here's a little hint if you're playing this game. I don't know why that's not focusing all of a sudden. Okay, don't know why it's not focusing. But Obi-Wan, you don't want to get him. You don't want to capture him if you're the Empire, because the rebels could have a card that allows them to move this when you execute Obi-Wan. Or he sacrifices himself, basically. Here's Palpatine. I don't know why it's not focusing all of a sudden. So Palpatine, you got Vader. You got Grand Moff Tarkin, of course. Peter Cushing. And Moff Jerjerrod. And he's the guy, I need more men, at the beginning of Return. And General Tagg, who he's probably a pretty good guy for the job. He was the guy who had respect for the rebels and kind of feared them. But of course, you can't have your Death Star without using it, so you might get to Yavin and be able to Zorch the system, right? So you just place that over top, and that's a lot of fun. But you only have 3 of those. And the rebels could have a card that, again, gives them a chance to move their token this way. And again, once they meet, that's the end of the game. The dice are pretty cool. You got red dice and black dice, and each of the things that can fight, the infantry and the ships and everything, they all roll a particular die, and they only take certain parts of damage. Okay, so you have stormtroopers will roll 1 black die, and they'll die when they get hit with 1. Same with TIE fighters. But an assault carrier rolls a black die and a red die, and you got to hit it with 2 red dice. Okay? So, you, depending on what you're shooting with, so if we know that a Star Destroyer, you got to hit it with 4 red dice, well, you're not going to go after it with an X-Wing. Now, there is a 1 out of 6 chance that you'll get a hit that can transfer to red, but really, you want to attack it with a Y-Wing, with the bombers, or a Corvette, or the cruiser. All right? But battling is not what the rebels really want to do. Typically, although it does happen that you find yourself in a space to take a shot, but typically you just want to delay and distract the Empire as they're hunting you down. But really, I mean, these sculpts are just great. All right. So the time that you need, well, give yourself 4 hours, okay? Could go longer, might end shorter, right? Might end sooner than 4 hours, but give yourself 4 hours to play. So you're going to take a half hour to set the thing up, and then, well, maybe not a half hour. If 2 people are working and you know what you're doing, you can get it set up in about 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to give it a 7 for time. For ease, it's not really easy to get into. There's a rule book, there's a reference book, and there's a lot of ifs thens, so be ready for that. I'm giving that a 6. For space, I'm going to give it a 7. This is only half the board. Okay, so it's another. So you need a fairly large place to play and leave all your cards out, and everybody has their sheets, and everybody, all 2 players, have their sheets. So yeah, I'm going to give that a 7. And for the components and the theme, I'm giving it a 9.5. And why am I not giving it a 10? Because wouldn't it have been great if these had been plastic sculpts of these characters? Wouldn't that have been great, to match all these ones here, except, make them big, tall leaders? I think that'd be pretty cool. But I only took off half a mark for that, because I understand the cost of that probably would be prohibitive. All right, so that's it for Star Wars Rebellion. And let me know in the comments who wins more when you play. We're pretty even. We are pretty even for us. So let us know if you play this game, who wins more. Here's a game that I bought about 25 years ago, and I actually got it at not a dollar store. Actually, I forget what it's called now, but it's a store where people send stuff, like a liquidation world or something. Maybe that's what it was called. And I was able to pick this up along with a few other old Avalon Hill games, and they were selling them for like $1.50, $2. So I went and bought one of each of a few of them. But they're obviously the kind of games that they're selling them for $1.50 for a reason, I thought. But London's Burning actually is a really excellent game. If you ever get the chance to play it, I highly recommend it. I haven't played it for a couple of years now, actually, but it does have a solo component, and that's why I bought it, because I knew I'd have trouble. The people that I played games with were much more into Euro games than they were into any sort of war games. But here's the map, very simple. You're flying in. You're coming in here. You're going to follow up the Thames. So you're coming in from the east, follow up the Thames, bomb London or some of the airfields, and then come back. And that's all you're trying to do. And meanwhile, from all the different airfields, you're trying to scramble your fighters and keep your fighters alive. Now, the fighters, they're few and far between compared to the German Air Force as it's coming in. The Luftwaffe brings in all those 109s, some 110s, and then they got their bombers. Okay, and there are lots of places to hit, and you just kind of wear down the Germans as time goes on. That's the idea. Is you're trying to do is just wear them down, wear them down, wear them down. But you got to keep your fighters blasting away, and there are a lot of things to look at in this game. There's a lot of things to keep track of. All the planes that you have left, so you keep one token for here and one token for there, so you have 65. Pretty simple. But then you have just the way that you're attacking. So you're coming in at what angle, what's the altitude, and then you're what direction that they're coming in and how you're attacking. So are you coming at them head on, or are you coming at them from an angle, coming out of the sun? So depending on time of day, all that sort of stuff you have to figure in. So there are a lot of things to look at. They even have the actual days for the Battle of Britain here in August and September of 1940. And you can do a short scenario, and the short scenario ends after a week. You just do the 6 days and you're done. And September 6th, you can go here, or you can do the full one all the way to, I believe that was Eagle Day, was the 15th. And that's where the Germans figured out this just ain't working anymore. And how much can they get London burning by? How many of the radar get knocked out? Radar are just on the board here. All right, so you try to knock them out. So, yeah, It's pretty complex though until you really get into it, and it's not too terribly bad. I have seen much worse rule books, and but it is pretty wordy. But this is old school, right? This is how we used to do it. Now, the back half of the rule book is all the history, right? So it helps get you into what the game is all about and why they had certain things and why they are in the game. They give you the stats of how the battle went. They tell you all about the aircraft. It really actually dives in. So thematically, it's a very strong game. Unfortunately, since it is made from way back in the day, this one 1995, which is 30 years ago now, everything is just cardboard. So that's always disappointing, right? But there are other games, right? There are other games that you can bring in miniatures, and I could bring in my Axis and Allies miniatures into here and put the planes up on the little stands and go for it. But it doesn't come with it. You'd have to substitute that in. So for London's Burning, the time is, honestly, if you want to play this whole thing with 2 people, they say 8 hours, which I would say is, yeah, at least. At least, because with, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's, 35, so it's about 34 turns that you have to do, 34 days of battle, and there are sometimes more than one battle on a day, and there's lots to figure out. That's 35, so it could go longer. You could be up around 10 or 11 hours if you don't keep things rolling. And if you're nosing the rule book the first few times you play, it can take a while. So I'm going to give that a 7. The ease, it's not easy to get into. You really have to be dedicated to learning a new game. You have to be dedicated to, learning all these little nuances, right, that these old style Avalon Hill games have. And if you're more of a plug and play guy, like I really am a plug and play kind of a guy. I'm a beer and pretzels guy. There are a few games I'll really get into, but yeah. So it's a 4. It is difficult to get into. The rule book's not terrible. It's not terrible, but it's, pretty wordy. And I think I said Eagle Day was here, but that's the dead day. The Eagle Day was the first day of the scenarios that they chose here. Of course, Britain was getting shot up before this, but Eagle Day was when Goering was, we are going to go like crazy, and it just didn't work so well for them, thankfully. So the space needed. So there's 2 boards here. There's that board and then this chart, and you need some space to put out your tokens. You need space to put out all your little tokens. Many of them end up on the board here, but you need to keep them handy nearby. And you do have to have a space to roll dice. So that's not terrible. I gave it an 8. And components and theme, again, the theme is very rich. I think they do a good job of capturing the Battle of Britain, but the components, not real thrilled about, so we're going to give that a 7. All right, that's it for Avalon Hill's London's Burning. All right, I got to be really honest with you. I forget how to play this game. But I remember enough about it to give you a quick rundown. So Kingmaker, this was given to me by my roommate back in, 96, I believe, the year before I got married. He bought this for me. And it was made, this one that I have here is actually made in 81. All right, so this game right now is 44 years old. And it looks it, right? But there's something to it. It's got a real feel to it. Essentially, what you're trying to do is get somebody over to the Canterbury Cathedral or some cathedral and have an actual archbishop there to crown you the king. So you got to get all these things working together. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of lords out here, and they're going to help you or harm you. all along the way. So here's one little battle that I've set up. So maybe you've been able to get all this stuff. And these are just cards, and you can see the perforated edges, like you just kind of rip them out as they come in a big sheet. So this is, they didn't put a lot of money into this one. All the tokens are cardboard tokens, right? Just cardboard tokens of all the different lords and some other things you need to know. So anyway, as we go through this War of the Roses, we have the Duke of Somerset, who's also the Earl of Westmoreland, the Marshal of England, and he's got a couple of companies of Saxons with him. And then we've got the Earl of Northumberland and the Earl of Salisbury. So he's attacking him. I don't even remember if you need to have these guys like in Westmoreland or if you can attack them wherever. But let's just say you can do this. So we've got 70, 170. We have 190 here. And defending, we have 130. So there's no dice to roll, all that kind of stuff. No, you simply just flip a card. You flip an event deck. And again, I don't remember all the rules, but I do remember this. So we have a 3-2 victory. So it's a 3-2 victory. So then you have to go over to your table of odds and find the 3-2. Then you find the weaker force, which in this case is 130, which means that the attacker, in order to have that 3-2 odds, would need 200. And as we've already counted, he only has 190, so that would be a failed attack. But then you also look here and you see who's been killed. Pole, Percy, and Audley. Then you look and see if anybody Percy's dead. Right? So you didn't win the battle, but maybe you can take him tomorrow. Right? So, yeah, that's how that goes. Pretty random. Having to look at charts, right? That's Avalon Hill, right? I don't have squad leader or advanced squad leader on here. Many of you might be big fans of that, but couldn't get into it. Too much into the rule books for these types of games. But this game, thematically, it does actually bring you right into the War of the Roses as you're trying to get people on your side to help you make yourself the king. The locations for all of the different towns are all on here. So you have Abingdon is H6, and so you find H, and then you find 6, and you find Abingdon, and there it is, right? And that's how you find it. So, yeah, this game's definitely over 40 years old. The rule book, right? Not bad there. Gives you the terrain and the things that it'll allow you to do, right? Cathedral is where you do need to get your guy, though. I do remember that. And then they tell you about all the events. But then they have optional rules, the advanced game, and then they do have a bunch of examples. So it's not terribly bad. Yeah, they've got their battle going on here and whatnot. So not terribly bad, but thematically we got a kick out of it as we played it a few times. And yeah, it's just good memory for me. I'm not going to say it's a fantastic game. I think it's fun, and thematically it's pretty strong. Time-wise, it does take a while because you do end up looking back and saying, okay, can I do that now? Or can I go down this road? Or can I cross this border? Or, how far can I travel if somebody gets in my way? So there are some things you have to keep looking at. I suspect if I played this a couple of times in the next week, I'd be back on the horse. But for the time here, I believe they say 4 hours for this game. I think we took about 6 to play. So time is not a real friend. I'm going to give it a 7. Ease of getting in, I'm going to give it a 5. There's a lot of nuance to this game, I do remember. Space, yeah, you don't need a ton of space. It's a typical table, so I think space will give it an 8. It's not too bad. Components and theme. Well, the components are not impressive. I'm surprised the board is actually mounted and not just paper. So not real happy about that. But the theme is actually pretty strong. As you look through the cards, it's got all the right language and it really kind of draws you in right that way. So, but the components are so cheap and everything, I've got to give it a 5. So thematically great, but yeah. Maybe, has anybody know if there's been a reissue of this? It's possible, I suppose. I know it was very popular back in the day, but don't know if it retained its popularity. So that's it for Kingmaker, folks. Well, the next 3 games, I'm going to do them all at once because they have so many similarities to them and they're all made by Academy Games. So we're talking about, in order, we're talking about 1755, that's the French and Indian War, 1775, of course, the American Revolution, and 1812, and that's the invasion of Canada. And here, in Canada, of course, not a country, but a region, a colony of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, I should say. So what we have here is a possibility for a 5-player game, but it really is a 2-player game. Very, very elegant, actually, in how it works. Card-driven, of course, but there are dice that decide a great many things. So everybody gets their little tokens, and you can see the squares. So it's pretty easy setup. You just grab and go. So the pink area up here is Canada, and the blue area, of course, is the United States. And so the blue is the American regulars, American militia is white, British regulars, Canadian militia, and then the Native Americans, the vast majority of whom sided with the British after the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which I don't want to get into a history lesson, but essentially told the American settlers that they couldn't cross over into the Ohio Valley and take land away from the natives who were living there without a special permission from the king. And so it's one of the things that led to the American Revolution, was the fact that land was getting very expensive and scarce, and the Americans wanted to expand westward, and the king was saying you can't do it. So that's why a lot of Americans ended up here as well. They came and settled up here. And at this point then, the War of 1812, there's impressment going on and just a whole bunch of bad things. And I could teach about these 3 games for hours and bore you to tears, but we're just going to carry on. The game itself, there's 2 wonderful things about it. One is very limited. It's 8 rounds. Okay, you're going to play 8 rounds. That is it. And these turn sequences for each round could be very different. Could be identical, but unlikely. And all you do is you pull out a die out of the box and you put it there. And whoever gets pulled out first, get pulled out second, get pulled out third, right? And that's how you find out who's going to play what. And then you move your little guys around based on your cards. So your cards allow you to move one guy 2 spaces here for the natives, okay? And so you'd move one guy 2 spaces. And then you can attack with anybody that was moved by the cards, okay? And there's a whole bunch of different cards in here. They all do sorts of great things. But what I want to focus on right now are the dice. All right, so you got the natives. So the natives have this, when they roll a target, that means they get a hit and they'll destroy one of the enemy units. If they get this, it means they run away from the battle. So there's 3 blanks where nothing happens, okay? But then there's a hit. So they can get a hit or they can flee. Now if they flee, and everybody's got flee except for the regulars, they got flee, they come down here and they flee. And then what happens is they all get put on later, on the following turn. They get placed where they go back in will be different for each group. Okay, the militia are the same. They've got 2 hits, but they have 2 flee. Okay, so 2 blanks where nothing happens, and then there's a double chance they're going to flee from battle. And then the British regulars, of course, they'll have 3 hits and no flee. Redcoats definitely did not just flee. If they retreated, it was typically in good order, especially in this war. American militia, very similar to the Canadian militia, 2 hits, 2 flees, 2 blanks. And then the American regulars, they have 3 hits, like the British regulars, but there is a chance they will flee from the battle as well, because historically there was a number of times where the Americans did have to flee. They had to leave the battle. It didn't happen quite so much with the British regulars in this war, because they were typically fighting on home soil, and they were less likely to actually abandon where they were defending. And Lundy's Lane, it was a battle that took place over here, was an absolute bloodbath for warfare in North America in the early 19th century. And it was pretty horrific. Both sides had many, many casualties. But this game plays very smoothly. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. And 54 and 75, very similar, all similar stuff. They actually, you could just line them up and play one after the other and have a great time doing it. One thing I really appreciated, though, and this is that extra touch that you just really enjoy, is just a nice letter of thank you. And I know it's, computer, but it was, signed and everything, but it's nice, right? It's a nice touch. You feel like when you buy this, you are, you're part of a group that's all doing the same thing instead of just buying a game on your own. So, highly recommend them. These are great. And all 3 are very similar. They all play about the same amount of time, same amount of setup, same amount of space, and thematic and components are all the same as well. And as it goes, so are the scores. So, for the time, I gave it an 8, because you can sit down and play the game in an hour. You absolutely can. I think they say 1 to 2 hours on the boxes, but you can definitely play it in an hour. Once you know what you're doing, you can play it in an hour. The ease of learning, it's a pretty simple game to learn, but again, there's nuance. And until you realize, oh shoot, those guys aren't attacking again. Like you might have where your British or your American regulars go in and have a great attack. All right. But then when you do the next round, oh, they're not till now. And they might take a dirty beating by the time they get to actually respond. And put on some reinforcements. So just be ready for that. Space, all of them, I gave an 8, because you can, on a table, it's all you need. And you can roll the dice right on the board typically, or just offside. And components and theme. Cardboard turners here, right? British, right? So the British would take, Erie and get a point for that, or the Americans could take, that Fort Erie and get a point. Okay, so it's cardboard. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand it's a cost thing. And wooden blocks, again, nice. I like wooden blocks; they're fine. But these dice, these definitely tip the scales upwards. Definitely. Really like that's a great idea. Great way to balance out the game. Plus, there's a maximum. You can only roll 3 of these, 2 of these, and 3 of these, and 2 of these. Because the rest of these are going to be sitting up here in the order. So that's the most when you go to attack. So even if I have every single opportunity, I'm only going to have 8 dice here. Oh, that's a pretty good roll. 5 hits, 1 flee. And the Americans, the most they're ever going to have is 5 dice. Okay. The Americans tend to have more stuff on the board, but again, they're not going to have the amount of dice to roll if the British player plays properly. So components, these move it up to an 8. All right, so that's it from the Academy Games, the 3 North American wars, and can't really stress how much fun they are. And we're going to move way back into the 80s now and start going into the games you probably are a bit more familiar with. All right, some of you may recognize this, the Xeno Games World at War. And this is the map, and this is the one that came out in 2005. And Xenogames, though, came out in 1990 with this game. And so what they saw was Axis and Allies and said, you know what, we're going to do our spin on this. I don't know the whole story behind Xenogames. They closed their doors 4 years ago, I found out. And they no longer do any business. But they were in Montreal back in the day. I'm not sure if that's where they finished as well. But you can obviously see it's got that feel of Axis and Allies, right? You got the little battle boxes up, not the battle boxes, but the places up here for you to put your stuff. And, you know, you've got, it's very bold colors. And the minis right here, right? They added a few, right? So in the original game, you had transports, battleships, and subs and carriers. They added destroyers to the mix as well, and you got your infantry, anti-aircraft guns, bombers, fighters, and tanks. And they really went all out and tried to figure out how can we make a game that's even more involved. And again, this is in 1990. This isn't that long after the original Axis and Allies. Not the one that was the cardboard counters. I don't have that. But the original, the plastic one I'm going to show you, came out in 84. So not that long after. Now, the components are not expensive, but they are all made in the 2005 version, which is the one I've got. They just printed this on cardstock, right? But it's, you know, got the colors to it and everything. They got the full color setup charts, but again, it's cardstock, right? It's not, you know, not on cardboard as it were. That'd be much more expensive for them. Small company, right? And the rule book is just printed out on cardstock and then folded and stapled. So it's not one that's got tons of, mass production cash behind it. But they're still beautiful, right? Still, they made them really nice and have the, have a good quality photos up in the corners of all the different people, and they have some of your favorite sayings by them. And everything is right here, which is really nice if you're going to be upgrading your stuff. And this is the technology chart here. I think I skipped over that. They have the cardboard roundels. I left mine here because I didn't need to punch them, so I just left them on the sheet. And then here's just a World at War Online. I don't think that happens anymore, and Xenogames.com, I believe, is now defunct. And little thank you note, which is always nice. This is what you should have. And so, yeah, the box says 395 plastic playing pieces, but you should just have these on the trees, right? So, and you remember those days, folks, when you had to cut everything off the trees, and if you really cared, you got your nail clippers out and trimmed them up nicely. So, yeah, that's, that was pretty forward thinking, though, for Xenogames, a small Canadian company. But I believe a lot of you have mentioned this particular offering from them. And good for them, going out there and doing that. Unfortunately, of course, can't go on forever. And despite having a good enough run to be able to put out a boxed game of this size. I believe this one cost me $100 back in, I think I got it in 06. And again, that was a lot of money back then for a game. And I bought it mainly for the minis. And we ended up playing it a few times. But we were, at that point, I was with people who, again, I think I mentioned this before, didn't really like war games. So it was kind of a tough sell. So they thought you had to be brilliant to play these games. I'm like, no, I play them. So anyway, that's it for World at War. I guess I better tell you, the time-wise, it does take quite a bit longer than original Axis and Allies because of all the technology and all the options. Far larger number of territories out here, and yeah, there's a lot more options. Also, with France being a power, I mean, for the first round, but France being in there was a bit of a game changer. So it did add more time and decision making. But the time, it's your typical A&A style game. So you need to have some good time. I'm going to give it a 6 for time. For ease of learning, if you go in cold, it's not a very simple game to learn. There's a lot more to it. If you go in knowing Axis and Allies, at least you have some basis. But ease, it's not real easy. I'm going to give it a 6 as well. It's not terrible, but not real easy. The space you need, well, you need a good sized table to have everything spread out and have these sheets, right? They take up quite a bit of space. I'm going to give that a 7. And as far as the components and the theme goes, well, the theme, pretty self-explanatory. These components are really good for a small company. I thought they were really well done. The cardboard and stuff, though, kind of lowers down a little bit. But the board is really good. Good mounted board here. So I'm going to give them an 8 for components and theme. All right, so that's it for Xenogames World at War. All right, you know this one. Not much to say about Axis and Allies. It's the granddaddy for me, and probably for many of you, going back to the Milton Bradley Game Master series. And I mean, what can you say? We all know the board, we all know the pieces. And for myself, the time that it takes, I'm going to give that a 6, because it can take many hours if you're playing with some people who are really going for it. The ease of learning Axis and Allies, for a lot of people, it's difficult. It's difficult to get into it, to learning how to move things around and learning about need this or less and the money and all the rest. But it's also one of the more accessible war games out there for in reality. When it came out, there was a complexity to it, but it's pretty basic these days. So I'm going to make it a 7. And for space, it's a 6, because, it's a pretty big board, but then you need all your space around the edges. You need a place to roll dice, and you need a place to just take a walk sometimes. You know what I'm talking about. But for the components and the theme, I gave it an 8, and that's a solid 8. I think it does a very good job. The only kind of letdowns is that some of the plastic pieces, some of mine were broken when I got them, unfortunately, and the cardboard pieces and the paper money. Not a huge fan of paper money anymore, but at the time that was the way to do it. I'm much more about the chips now. So, but that's my score for them. And the final game from Game Master that I actually own is Fortress America. And this one I purchased at the same time I bought the Shogun and the Axis and Allies back in 1989. I was working in Kingston, Ontario, and I went to Dufferin Game Room store and bought them, and they were all $50. And then years later, I bought those other Shoguns for $30, and I got another Fortress America for $20. And at one point, I had 4 copies of the original Axis and Allies. So, but here we are, Fortress America. We have just a pretty, typical board split up of America in 5 regions and a whole bunch of little smaller territories. And they're being attacked by forces that outnumber them 3-1 at the outset of the game. And yeah, America gets stronger as time goes on, and the invaders kind of peak on turn 5 is when they've had the chance to have everything on the board, minus some that have died along the way, and then it's downhill for them. and hopefully uphill for America. And the way America gets stronger are these cards, and you just follow what they say. So you're putting on 6 guys there separately where possible, and yeah, you just try to get things going. Sometimes they give you good things like your laser shoot on a 3 or better. And the neat thing about this game is what they've done is instead of making the units roll certain numbers, all the units have to roll the same numbers, but then they have different dice. So the red are D6, the white are D8, and the blues are D10. And so obviously the better the unit, the higher the dice, and they have to roll that number or higher. And you can see here, into city or mountain without having combined arms, you typically have to roll a 6. But if you have combined arms, or if you're defending, just a 5 or better. And because the attackers are typically attacking, there you go. One neat little thing in this game are the lasers. I didn't get one out, but yeah, you know what? I'm going to get a laser out of here because they're kind of cool. All right, here we go. So there's a laser. And lasers come out and they just go into various cities, and you sit there and you zap things. And pretty simple. You just target it, you roll, you want to get a 5 or better most of the time, and you just take it out of play. So you're targeting their high-tech stuff, typically bombers or helicopters. Sometimes you attack ground units. So maybe they have 2 bombers, 2 helicopters, and a bomber, a helicopter, 2 tanks, and 1 man, 1 infantry. You might actually resort to the infantry, because if you kill the infantry, now they don't have combined arms. Now everything's now got to roll a 6. So that's a strategy you can employ as well. But it's a pretty straightforward game, pretty basic. You've got the rules for the helicopter and the bomber. I think they made them a little more complex than they really needed to be, but they're not that bad once you get the hang of it. Basically, it's a combat and a non-combat move for them. Everything else just stays where it is. And there you go. The rule book is kind of cool. They give you a nice... you kind of feel like you're watching Red Dawn, the good one from 1984. But this is gives you a little history about what's going on. I was able to pick up something years ago, a bit of an expansion pack to Fortress America. Okay, and this is totally unauthorized, but they strafing run games. I don't even know if they're still doing anything, but they bring in all these special units and whatnot, and then give you an alternate card to use for the different things. So they got heavy assault, heavy weapons, airborne, right? Various other things, troop transport, helicopters, bringing stuff in. So, and they've got this here, right? So yeah, that's how you just distribute them, I suppose. I never actually played this. These are the little things that you can stick on stuff to give it that you're the troop carrier or anti-aircraft or what have you, and you can put them on there. I never actually played with it. Let me know in the comments if you did, if you ever got this Fortress America upgrade. I never did anything with it. But the nice thing about these old MB games is they give you every chance to understand what's going on. That's extra printing as I did, but on the back of the rule book, right, they'll have that same thing that they got here. So one person can hang on to that, one person can hang on to that, hang on to the rule book. There you go. The rule book's pretty thick, but a lot of it is just these. They really, really, really break down a lot of stuff. And once you've played it a couple times, it's over. You just go. You just go. Okay. So what I gave to Fortress America for time, I gave it a 7. I think it plays faster than Axis and Allies, and quite fast, a lot more quickly than Shogun does. So I gave it a 7. The ease, it's not as tough as Shogun, but not as easy as Axis and Allies. There's just there's a lot of things to consider. And for America, typically you're on the defensive, but every now and again, if you can attack, it's really great because you'll usually get 2 cards each turn, but you'll get an extra one if you take back a city. Oh, and the goal is for the invaders to hold 18 cities by the end of any round, and America ends the round. So, for space, again, a 6, the same as the other 2, because again, you got your armies on the sides, you need a place to roll, you need your reference cards. And for the components and the theme, well, the components are great. They're plastic. There's helicopters and troop carriers and bombers and whatnot. There's no fighters in this game, which I always thought was odd. I think they'd probably play a pivotal role, but the theme, I think they do a pretty good job. The cards help enrich the theme quite a bit. And you honestly, when this came out and you played it, you're like, oh man, I could see this happening. This would be so cool. No, it wouldn't be cool. We know it's not cool. But that whole Red Dawn thing. Hey, I was a teenager when I saw Red Dawn in the theater, and although nobody ever wanted it to really happen, you all thought you could actually handle yourself versus Soviet, or I guess they were Cuban or whatever, Central American forces. You thought you could just hide out in the woods and do fine. So the theme, I gave it an 8 for the components and the theme. I think they did pretty well in this. And hey, the game's still alive. So all 3 of my Game Master games here, these are the original boxes. You can see they're pretty banged up. But hey, it's been 36 years since I bought them. So there you have it. So that's it for Fortress America. I don't have broadsides and boarding parties. I have played it. I think it's a fun game. But that could not have been cost effective for Milton Bradley to put that one out. But on to the Axis and Allies and the HBG games. Here we go. Then we're going to move into another Game Master Series game, that's Shogun, and it's been re-released as Samurai Swords. I have a copy of that as well. I have 2 copies of Shogun and 1 of Samurai Swords. I don't know how that happened. Just got to have it. Now this is a game you want to play with 5 people. I don't have the board set up, but it is a fabulous game. And the couple of components I want to point out here. The first is the swords. The swords, this is just a great idea. I don't know who came up with it. They were designing it and said, hey, how do we choose first player? We could just have cards or whatever. Somebody said, no, let's have swords. And not sure how the lighting is here, but there are diamonds on the sword blade. 1 diamond to 5 diamonds. So one person just holds the swords and the other people pull the swords out, and that's what you are that turn. Or that round is you're going to be turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's pretty cool, and that changes every turn. And you can you can bid koku. This is koku, so that's pretty cool, right? And some people would put their koku on their swords, but you'd spend it right away. So that didn't make a lot of sense, but I guess they like to do it. And the koku are essentially, you add up the number of territories you have and you divide by 3, and that's the koku you get, rounded down, of course. But you always have at least 3. The castles, very cool. You get a castle and then you get a fortified castle. And they just have some guys run out and help defend you when you get attacked. It's a D12 system, which was kind of revolutionary for the time. And you got Ronin or Ronin, depending on who you're speaking to. And just pretty nicely detailed, though. They did a pretty good job with these, and all the armies look really good. But this guy here, I mean, he's the star, right? The old ninja. You can hire him to go assassinate, and, he does okay. I think he's is he a 75% chance to hit or a 66% chance to hit? But if he doesn't hit for you, the guy who you targeted can now target you and come back at short odds to get you, but sometimes it happens. But this is the part that I really like about this game, is the little screens that you have. So very nice, the artwork on here. And this is where you would keep all your armies, and then you put your koku into different things. So if I want to build a castle, you need 2, so probably shouldn't put it there. But to levy units, just to build your army, to hire Ronin, your sellswords of this game. You want to hire the ninja. This comes down to, if 2 people offer the same amount, then the ninja doesn't get hired, just done, right? So hopefully you bid enough to get the ninja if you really want them. Or you put in here to take swords, because you put this in, and then you take your swords. And yeah, you can go first. You can just say, I'm going first this turn. One option that we did sometimes was we'd pull out the swords, but then we'd keep it secret as to who's first, second, third, fourth. Well, first would say, okay, I'm first, but everybody else could keep it secret, so you don't know who's actually going next. That added a measure of suspense to the game. But a great game all around. Again, don't play with people who don't want to be attacked, because, again, to kick them when they're down. The time. Now, I'm speaking from personal experience. I did play one game. This is back in 1999. Yeah, I remember. And we were playing, and I did horribly. My dice were cold, and I was playing a 5-player game, and the other 4 guys just chipped away at me. Ended up killing my last general, so I'm out of the game. And that was about 2 hours in, like maybe on turn 3. I was out. I thought, okay, well, now this will go fast, right? Because there was only 4 guys playing. Unfortunately, they made 2 camps of 2 guys each, and they basically danced around the board for the next 8 hours. So it was an 11-hour game. And we've actually played longer as well, but usually everybody's still in the game. So I had an 8-hour break where I didn't get to do anything. I'm just watching these guys play, because we were out at a camp and there was nothing to do. So I split wood to help keep the place warm. And yeah, so for time with this one, it can get away on you. It's not a certain number of turns. There's no capture this capital and you win. There's no, people just surrendering. Because if you have just one guy left, like one general left, and you can keep your army healthy, you can still win. So people don't tend to give up in this game. So I gave it a 3. You really don't know how long this game is going to go. This is probably one of the most unknowns of any of the games I've shown you so far. For ease of play, because of all the interpersonal stuff that goes on, the different types of units that you can buy, building, your turn order, and here's all the different units and how they attack, the die roll you need for the combats, and that you have ranged bowmen and gunners, and then you have your melee from the daimyo down to the spearmen, and there's different sequences. And yeah, so some people do get a little confused by that. Again, if you're a gamer, it's really not too bad, but for your average person, I gave it a 5. For space, I gave it a 6. It's pretty similar to Axis and Allies. But for the components and the theme, I think the theme and the components are really strong. If you don't like the sound of styrofoam rubbing up against styrofoam, or just people rubbing styrofoam, I guess some people really get set off by the sound of styrofoam. I don't know. Doesn't bother me. But other than that, I really like it. I gave it an 8.5. The only problem is that these Ronin and many of the swordsmen and the bowmen, these things snap off. It's a very brittle plastic. And so a number of my swordsmen don't have swords. But other than that, it's a fantastic game. Just don't get out early. Shogun. All right, now I'm going to go through all of the Avalon Hill offerings of Axis and Allies games, You may actually see like a Renegade Games, or I think Wizards of the Coast did 1914 first, I think. Memory serves. But ostensibly, the Axis and Allies that you are all familiar with. And I'm doing these in order of how I like them. I'm not assigning them numbers, though. Okay, I'm just going to tell you the good and the bad. And again, this is just one guy's opinion. I might not like a game, and you're like, that is my favorite game. Hey, great, good for you. It's your experience, it's my experience. And, sometimes I don't like games at all just because of the first and only time I played it, which brings me to Guadalcanal. I've played it a couple or three times now. I like theater games. I really enjoy them. I like being able to, get into something that's, not global in nature, a little bit more micromanagement. So I do enjoy that, and you certainly have a chance with that with Guadalcanal. The negative for me are the mechanics. The mechanics and some of the rules of this game just don't make much sense. Supplies, I don't have a problem with supplies. That's a thing in many games. Supplies obviously very important in warfare. The logistics, I get it. But the one thing that really I didn't enjoy is the fact that artillery could literally take out a battleship, take out a cruiser before the battles even begin, and that kind of annoyed me. I thought that's I don't know. Maybe if somebody can point out an instance where artillery sank a cruiser, even maybe a destroyer, it's possible, I suppose. But it's an important part of the game, and I just thought I didn't really like that part of it, and it's just so clumsy getting your units from off the board onto the board into this zone, go to that zone, but you can't go to this zone, and look out for this. And building an airfield, you can build on this island, but so can the enemy, and then whoever owns the island gets the airfields. And it's just, again, if I actually put a day into learning it with someone who knew it, I'd probably, okay, I get it now. But just because of the clumsiness of it and the way it's written up in the rules, and I've even watched harsh rules on it, and it made it clearer. But for some reason, I still, maybe it's just a mental block I have. I don't know. I really want to like this game. Again, I love Pacific Theater. I really love it. But yeah, this one, it fell short for me. I think they just made it more complicated than it needed to be. I'm a plug and play kind of a guy. I don't mind if there's depth to a game, but not in the mechanics. The mechanics should be straightforward. I'm attacking you with this. What do I need to roll? And just go for it. And I'm just going to move 2 or move 1 and not worry about all this other stuff that can happen. So, sorry, Guadalcanal. I still own you. And maybe someday I'll run into somebody who really loves you, and I can learn how to play the game properly and get over this don't like thing. All right, that's it for Guadalcanal. All right, the next one on the list, 1942, second edition. Not a bad game, okay? This is not a bad game. This is just a game I have not had a lot of time playing. I've played a number of them online. I believe this is the one that they have on Steam, so I played lots of these. And again, it's not really a bad game at all. It's quick. That's the one thing I like about it. You can play it fairly speedily, and it won't take up your whole day. So you can just play in a couple of 3 hours. You can pretty much figure out what's going on, and that's nice. So I think it's a good entry-level game as well for people just getting into Axis and Allies. I think it does a pretty good job of that. Few more opportunities to use things like artillery and whatnot, but a bit more streamlined than some of the other games. But it's a bit too basic. If I'm going to sit down and play a global war type game, I need something with a little bit more depth. Something that doesn't start halfway through the war. And I know that's the original Axis and Allies, and that's kind of what they're going on here. But I like to have some options available to build up what's going to happen before the war actually begins. But again, I don't really have anything bad to say about this. It's just a little too basic. I only ever played one game of this at at the tournament, and that was a number of years ago, and I got my butt handed to me because they moved so quickly, and I think the game was over in about an hour. I think we were turn 3, and it's like I I didn't know what happened. The Axis just rolled, and yeah. But that's my own. I just don't play the game well enough or often enough to be good at it. And I guess that goes for a lot of the games I'm going to be talking about here. If you don't have a good experience, it's probably not going to be a favorite of yours. I don't mind this game though. It's quick, but just a little too basic. All right, Battle of the Bulge. I bought this game many years ago, and it sat on my shelf. It was one of those, oh, I just got to have it, so I bought it. But I didn't play it. It just kind of sat there. I looked at it. I kind of played with the dice in that rolling box that they've got, and okay. But never really played it until Hell on Wheels over there in the UK said, hey, do you want to learn the game? I said, okay, here we go. And so, again, it's a theater game, and the dice mechanics, I think, are a lot of fun. Shaking up the box of dice. The only real negative thing is that the game relies very much on you being able to do stuff as the Germans early on. And the reason I know that is when I played Hell on Wheels, on the very first turn, he got some bad dice, I got some good dice, and he said, well, that's it. He said, we'll keep playing. He said, but this was a very important attack. And I failed. And he says, you're likely going to win now. It's going to be very difficult for me to win. And I thought, what, one attack out of like 8 that you did here on the first round? You got everything else in this one attack. But it was up in the north. It was I remember it was on the very northern edge of the board. And I stopped him. And he said, yeah, it's over. And eventually it was. I won the game. He took it the next turn, but he said he was a turn behind the whole time, and that I guess allowed me to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, and I won the game. So I think any game where they have one setback early on is going to orchestrate your eventual defeat. I'm not big on that. I think there's got to be ways that you can recover, and easily. Not that you'll win, but that you can overcome an early setback. Late game setback, that's a different story. But early setbacks, I think, if you're wanting the game to follow a certain narrative, and this one certainly does, you should be able to do it. And if you can't, you should be able to recover. So that's why Battle of the Bulge isn't real high up on the list. But it's good. We did have a fun time playing, though. And I've played a few games. And again, supplies, trucks, things like that, it's always neat to have in a game. So there you go, Battle of the Bulge. So Axis and Allies Revised Edition here. And I know some of you are saying, what? This is higher on your list than 42? Why is that? Well, simply because of this. Because that was the first one where we came out with the destroyers and the artillery, and they branched out a bit and gave us something new in the game. I also use this one to introduce people to Axis and Allies. This one here is a little smaller, a little bit, little easier to manage when you're just starting out. There's no Italy, and so it's a good intro game. Unfortunately for myself, if I were just going to sit down and play with other guys who really know how to play, probably wouldn't pull this one out. We'd probably go with something a little bit more in depth. But if we don't have much time, if we've only got like 3 hours and we got to get her done, we'd probably do this one, and we'd know probably by the end of 3 hours who's going to win. So yeah, it's just pretty basic, pretty simple, and it's quick playing games. So that's why it's a little higher on the list than 42. And again, yeah, I always like innovations in games. There you go. That's revised. All right. Well, I'm probably going to get some hate over this, but This game just makes me laugh. Now, you can play it without the zombies, and you can actually play on the revised or the 42 board. You can play and use zombie cards and use zombie dice and all the rest. You can do that. But I'm just talking about this game itself. This Axis and Allies and Zombies. Um, it's just fun, right? So again, you got to be in the right frame of mind. If I want to sit down and have a serious game about World War II and try to redo history, I'm not going to play this, right? But if I want to sit down and have a great time with somebody else or a few other people and have some laughs and have some groans and all the rest, this is the one. This is the game to do that with. Though it's such a wild card, these zombies. They can cause so much havoc, or they can do very little. I've had games with both, and you just don't know what you're going to get. The negative part about it, of course, is it's completely ahistorical, and it does take your mind off the conflict. Right? You stop thinking about the conflict, and you're just trying to survive. You're trying to kill zombies, and you forget, oh yeah, I'm trying to take Moscow. And the other negative for this is there's just not enough units out there in some places. It's really thin, and if the zombies have a good chomp, well, there you go. But I suppose that's part of the game design. It's just very difficult to get any sort of like tanks or artillery anywhere in the world. If you are Japan or if you are Britain and America, I mean, everything is transports, right? You're not going to be able to go anywhere anyway, so it's like any other game for America. But since you can't build factories, you're really limited. So that, I suppose, is the idea. But again, if you're not looking to be serious about it, I can't see a better game than just sitting down and watching the zombies do their thing. This is a game that I was able to pick up. I pre-ordered it last year, and I got it in, I believe, September, October. And I very quickly did an unboxing, and then I very quickly did a gameplay video where I screwed up about 150 rules. So, the lead creator, Matt Hyra, I hope I'm saying your name right there, Matt. Hira. But he left me a note on the Hilltop Pillbox and said, hey, thanks for doing the game. And he kind of gave me chapter and verse and some timestamps of some things I got wrong. I'm like, oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So then I went and did a second game. And he did the same thing, just it was a much shorter list. And then I did a third game where I actually got pretty much everything correct. But he said, hey, here's some strategies you might want to try so it's not such a blowout for the Allies. And so it was great having the designer take time. I really appreciated that. Take time to steer me straight on the game. So I love theater games as well. The new sculpts, really nice. Obviously I've replaced some of the sculpts with HBG. But I think the idea of having some of those small sculpts was pretty cool. I think the sculpt car could have been a bit bigger for the British. I think that Jeep was just a little too tiny. But that's neither here nor there. The convoy system, I think that's an ingenious way to do it. If you're going to do it abstractly, I think that's the way they did it was pretty good, and they avoided having to make transports, since that kept costs down. Now, I think that was a great system that they use, but that's also part of the negative, is that it's not really Axis and Allies. It's trading on the name, of course, which is fine because Larry Harris was part of this, right? So it's obviously not a problem. But it's not Axis and Allies, and if you go in thinking that it is, you're going to make all the mistakes I made. And it gets frustrating when you're like, well, can't you do this? No, you can't do that. Unless, or if then, and a lot of exceptions to the rules. And that really bogged me down. So I really, really, early on, I had trouble with the game. Once I've gotten to know it, and I've played a few more games of it, and I got to play a couple videos ago here, I got to play against a guy here in Abbotsford, and so we played, and I think we got most of the rules right, and we were checking each other and making sure we got the rules right. And you know what? It's such an enjoyable game. It is. It really is a fun game to play. The stumbling block for me was the rule book. It was very difficult to just plug and play, because when you're looking for one thing, it's not on the section you think it would be, and it's in another section, so you don't bother looking. You think, oh, I guess I can do it, and then you see later on, well, I can't. And so that was for me, that was a struggle. I'm being a teacher. I try to be anyway, very clear with directions and instructions, and I found this one to be a bit difficult. But the game itself, that's why it's this high on the list, because the game itself is actually a great game. Now that I know how to play it, I know I'll enjoy it for years to come. Just know that you don't treat it like an Axis and Allies game. It's very similar to Guadalcanal, very similar to Battle of the Bulge. They're not really Axis and Allies games. And that's kind of inevitable with a theater game, is you're not going to have the same mechanics. But there's a lot of different mechanics in this. And I think the game design is actually quite good. And it is a lot of fun to play. Once you realize what you're doing, then you realize the opportunities, and you say, that's a strategic move I should make. So the negative part would just be the rule book. And one other thing is that Malta, which even has a big target on it here on the box, Malta itself is so key that if the Axis can keep on top of it, they'll likely win the game. Whereas if they don't, they'll likely lose the game. And it's one thing about games, I don't like it when games play you. And it felt like that was a little bit of a part of our game when I played against an opponent, was Malta was important. And because I was able to stop Malta from actually operating, eventually I took Cairo as the Axis. So, yeah. Nothing really bad to say about the game itself. Just I don't like it when one thing can really sway a whole game. I don't like one thing being a game changer. I like to be a whole bunch of little things, and you need a lot of them to go a certain way in order to change the game. But other than that, really like North Africa. It's a fun game, and once you get to know how to play it, I think you'll probably agree with me. Good times. All right, here we are, Axis and Allies D-Day, and this one here is, it's a fun game. It's a fun game. It's simple, plug and play. You just open it up, put out the stuff on the little silhouettes, and you start rolling dice. It's really, really simple. So that's the great thing about this game. You can play it in about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours if you just fly. You've also got the cards that you can use, the fortune cards and the tactics cards if you'd like. I rarely do, but you can, and it can really change the flavor of the game. The part I don't like about this game is there's no Luftwaffe, which I think there should be. And you're also very limited on your decision making. They tell you what you can put in, or what you start with. They tell you how many units you can put in. They tell you what units you're putting in based on your die roll. And I always felt like I'm just kind of going through the motions and the game is playing itself. So I didn't really like that, and it was a little annoying. But the game itself, it's quick, it's fun to play, and of course, you know, I made Invasion Normandy for HBG, along with the help of a lot of other people, and we added in all the things that this bad boy doesn't have, because I thought it just needed more depth. But for what it's meant to be, I think it pulls it off quite elegantly, and the blockhouses are kind of a neat thing. They don't tend to last too long and make a huge difference in the game, but I thought that was a fun addition too. So there's D-Day. Axis and Allies Europe is one that came out at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and you've seen it on my channel a few times. Again, it's simple. It's got some nice little additions in it, the convoy zones, and the oil in the Middle East is always a neat mechanic that I enjoy going after. Very attainable, and it's annoying without being game breaking. The one thing about the game though that's a bit annoying is that if you make some mistakes early on, as the Germans or the Soviets, the other two can do what they want, but it's basically a Germany versus the USSR game. And then America's trying to do stuff and the Brits are trying to do stuff, but it's basically those two. And a mistake early on, moving people to the wrong territory or not building in the right territory or not building the right units, can have you screwed. And again, I've mentioned it before, I don't really like that where one mistake, and that's it, right? You can really hose yourself. There's not a lot of time to recover in this game for the Germans if you don't do it right. And there certainly isn't any time for the Soviets if you don't do it right. And if you have one big attack that you do and it goes poorly and you lose a bunch of your infantry, that can cost you the game. So not a lot of spaces on the board, but it's a very quick game. And within 2.5, 3 hours, you know which way it's headed. So that's good. Not a huge time sink. And if things go poorly, you can stop, reset, and do it again. So that's Axis and Allies Europe. And on the heels of Europe is Pacific. Yes, this one I enjoy quite a bit more actually than Europe, in that there really isn't anything you have to do as Japan, and the Allies are just on the receiving end for the first couple of rounds. It's just kind of survive. So it is a lot of fun. It's the Japanese sneak attack at the beginning, I think, is a lot of fun, where all the enemy just defends at a 1, so you're going out, you're just hammering as much stuff as you possibly can on round 1. Some people say it's scripted, that you must do this, that, and the other thing. I don't think so. I think there's some wiggle room there. I think you can choose to do more against some of the different nations, and you can try to take out different things. But you certainly do want to get to 20 points. I think it's 20 points on round 1, 30 points on round 2, and 40 on round 3 if you can, because then Japan makes its victory points. They get 1 victory point for every 10 IPCs they're collecting. So that is a really neat mechanic. I love that. It's a great way to do it, because once America gets in with its bajillion dollars, Japan will be losing money, right? They'll be losing territory. They're not expected to hold. And I love that type of game design. That's why I designed Invasion Normandy that way too, is the Germans aren't going to be pushing the Allies back into the sea, right? But can they deny them here and there and keep them out of the points, right? And this game isn't a timed game per se, it's a points game, but once Japan has been losing, it's unlikely they're going to start gaining again. So you can see the writing on the wall. The one negative thing about this game, though, is that it does follow a bit of a pattern for the Americans, in that once they've gotten rid of the Japanese transport fleet, you can just build bombers and you go bomb Japan, and you can actually take away Japanese victory points just by bombing Japan. So for every $10 that you bomb Japan, you take away one of their victory points. And that is very difficult for Japan to come back to, or come back from. And typically the Japanese player will just fold it once there's, a dozen American bombers raining death down on Tokyo. So that's the only weak point of this. The rest of it, though, is a very elegant game. It moves very well, and the Japanese have options, and that's the one thing I like about it. You can go whole hog for Calcutta. You can try to silence China. Don't recommend trying to go for Sydney, but you can. If you want to, you can, and you can take it, but you'll be out of position, so don't do that. Anyway, that's Axis and Allies Pacific. All right, World War I gets a little bit of love. This is the Wizards of the Coast edition of 1914. You all know and love it, and I've played it lots. I have lots of videos of this up on my channel. And what I really do like about this game is that it really mimics World War I very well, and the trench warfare system. And you can't deny that it turns into a slugfest, and that's what World War One was. So I like the pieces, the tanks, the planes. I think they look really cool. Naval units are amazing. The colors that they chose for the nations are amazing. And again, the mimicry of trench warfare, very well done. The only thing about this game I don't like is the board. The map, it's a masterclass in how not to design a game board. I think there's doing a re-release. Somebody's doing a re-release, or somebody made a map, because it uses, yeah, it's horrible. I know what they were trying for, but they didn't pull it off. So that's about the one weakness I think World War One has, the 1914 Axis and Allies. So that's it for me on World War One, 1914 Axis and Allies. One of my favorite games, one of the top three, and we're on to the last two. All right, getting near the top of the list here, we've got Anniversary. And I remember when this came out a long time ago, whatever it was, 30 years ago or whenever it came out, it was revolutionary. It really was. All the individual boxes, Italy's a playable nation, and it's just an amazing game. And if I have the time and if I have the person or people who really want to play it, this is probably my go-to for Axis and Allies games that don't take 8-10 hours, right? So I do like the fact it's a fairly simple game. The simplicity is there for Anniversary. It's not as complex as G40 and whatnot. So if you're just bringing somebody in or they're kind of new, it's a bit more accessible to your everyday average gamer. The only thing about it that is a little that doesn't put it in the company of our number one game is that the board's just a little too small. And I don't mean measurements. I mean there's not enough territories. And I find the sea zones to be well, put it this way. I don't think that Italy should be able to go from the Mediterranean and land in India. Or anybody else for that matter. But typically it's in India or Italy. And that's what I've done to a number of people. And every time I do it, I feel kind of, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. But it's right there. They can see it. It's possible. But it doesn't even seem logical at all. And so, I don't know. I think a couple more sea zones here and there would probably help things out a bit with this game. But that's about it. I think overall, this is probably the go-to game for me if I don't have a lot of time, and even if I want to play a solo game. It's a good solo game to play with 6 nations and some decent amount of money in the game. The NOs, take them or leave them. You got that option. So that's but it's right there near the top, folks. Right near the top for Anniversary. It is my number 2 Axis and Allies game. On to number 1. I'm sure you know what it is. Here it is. Well, this is one half of it. You know that Global 40 is what I'm going for here, but my Europe box is buried right now, and I thought, well, we'll just do the Pacific. Everybody knows Global 40, so I just did a game of this actually on my channel recently, and this is, it's just great. It's huge. It's a huge map. It's got everything that you need in a World War II game. The 6 nations. It's got a really decent rule set. It's got everything you really want, and you can play it in a day. Or if you really are getting into it, it can extend, right? You can put it over 2 days, right? If things are going really well for the Axis, but the Allies are still causing a little bit of grief, then this is the one. This is the one for me. Lots of options, right? You can recover. If you make a mistake in the first round or two, you're not doomed. You don't stop and say, well, let's just set it up again and try. You try to work your way out of it. And I think that's the strength of a great game. The downside of this game is, yes, it takes more time than Anniversary or some of the other versions. So it's the, we'll call it the magnum opus of the Axis and Allies world. But also there's so many variants. Now, if I can't talk about this game without mentioning BBR, right? And BBR has, I'm not even sure what number they're on now, 6 or 7, as they, add and delete some things from the rules and change the map a little bit here and there. Lots, well, what do they say? Plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. It's that idea that it's such a great game that you can develop so many different options off of this game. And you can also just play the game, right? I mean, second edition is what everybody wants, but you can just play the game, or you can make your own version, but base it heavily on this game. So I think that's what the strength of G40 is you can go anywhere with it. And even if you're kind of new to Axis and Allies, if you know a bit about the genre, if you know a little bit about wargaming, if you like, a large struggle, a global struggle, historically based, this is the game. So this is the one for the Axis and Allies games. That is my go-to. And yeah, that's the number one game right there for me for Axis and Allies. And on to historical board gaming. As you can see, I've had this entire time I've been doing all of my games on the Global War 39. And so we're going to talk about historical board gaming. Now, the big difference between Axis and Allies and HPG products is Axis and Allies are made by a game company. Whereas historical board gaming, I think, is a lot more about making historical simulations. I think it's about having you dive into these moments of history where you can exert a level of expertise and exert a level of pressure on a situation, be it globally or theater-based, and you feel as though you're actually making some changes, you're making some differences to history. And that is the strength of HPG games, and that's why I spent hundreds of hours, along with other gentlemen, working on Invasion Normandy. And you can see some videos on my channel, and Hambone has been making a lot of videos about it as well. And it is a fantastic game, it really is. I'm not going to be showing these in any order, by the way, of my favorites, but I will tell you what my favorites are. This one's really new, and of course I have a massive bias about it, but this was my response to the Avalon Hill D-Day game. The Axis and Allies D-Day game is that it's a fun little game to get out on the board, but I wanted more depth and I wanted more control over events. And so in this game, you decide what's hitting the beaches, you decide what's coming on for the Germans and where it comes on, right? It's not scripted. And if you've watched my videos at all, you know that is my one the one thing I don't like about games is when the games play you. I don't like that. I want to have as much control over every situation as possible. And so that's why I designed this game the way I did. And I feel that there is a real element of that in this game. And as you play it, you can really do things that are ahistorical and have a lot of fun doing it. And most of the games, actually all the games I've played, have been very close. Right down to the last battle on round 10 is typically where this game ends up. So I'm very pleased with that, because as well as the Allies are doing, the Axis, or the Germans in particular, they do better. And so they're able to push back at places, and then the Allies see where that's going on and they push back in the same place. And so it tends to draw force from both sides in equal measure. And then you end up with these wonderful battles at the end to decide the game. And that's what I love about Invasion Normandy. And thanks again to Doug Friend and all the people at HBG and the playtesters. Mike Kelly helping out with the rules, Hambone helping out with the playtesting, as well as some other guys. Just fantastic time. You can see on the board here, you got Mike Kelly is here. Got Hambone on the MG42. And you got Sky Marshal and then myself there as the Canadian. So it is it's a game that you make the decisions, you decide, and it's a great time. So I do highly recommend it, of course, but all bias aside, this is what a war game is meant to be. And that's why I made it the way I did. All right, Invasion Normandy from Historical Board Gaming. Check them out. And then we have Global War 2025 Meltdown. So this game I was honored enough to be a playtester of, and I helped with a little bit of development. Not a ton, just a few suggestions here and there. But a fantastic game. We are now in 2025, and hopefully this doesn't happen this year. But a wonderful game. And again, there are so many decisions that you get to make that the game allows you to make. The mechanics allow you to make. You do not have to do anything. It's not scripted. You don't have to follow anything because the game says so. You do it because, well, your enemy's doing this, so you better do this. And there's a lot of push-pull, a lot of cause and effect. But it's a very well-balanced game. And when the nukes start flying, hey, it's fun for everybody. But it incorporates a lot of stuff that's missing from war games, some intrigue, espionage, and things like this, where you can impact your enemy's ability to do certain things at certain times, and that's always a lot of fun. And I think it's thematically accurate. Whereas in, World War II, you're probably not going to have as great an effect on what your enemy does in his own borders, but on this one you sure can, just like you can today. Cyber technology and whatnot. All right, there you go. Global War 2025 Meltdown. Here we have Midway. This is designed by Mike Kelly for Historical Board Gaming, and it is a wonderful game. I haven't been able to play with another person. Had some runs at it as a solo tilt. It's a lot of fun. Again, the Pacific Theater has become probably my favorite theater. I very much enjoy carrier battles and the use of limited resources in a very short time span. This isn't a creepy crawly game. This is got to get out there and get her done. And I really enjoy that. And you have so many options as the commander of each side, and the fog of war is annoying, but you sure can surprise yourself with some of your tactical decisions and open the door wide. So, Battle of Midway, a great game by Historical Board Gaming. I highly recommend you check it out. It's very elegant, well designed, easy to play, and good time is had by all. America, yes, this is Historical Board Gaming's answer to Fortress America, and very similar, except more of a Japan and Germany after World War II, continuation of World War II, I suppose, coming in and encroaching on America. It gets weaker and weaker territorially, but so do the bad guys. They start running out of steam a little bit, and the Americans get to punch back. So some key differences, though, especially is the nuclear program in this game. It's very important to hang on to that as America as long as possible, and try to make the enemy pay with your technological advances. But really great game. Love the artwork, too. I mean, you'd hate to see this, but it was really, the concept is really good, and plays really well. So, highly recommend it. I had nothing to do with this one. I was just on the enjoying end of it. So, good times. America by Historical Board Gaming. And my number 2 game from historical board gaming is Global War 36. And this is a look at the version 4 map. And I picked it up when it was just brand spanking new. And I just love the colors. I love the oceans, right? Just you get the deep blue sea and the light blue shallows. Very cool. What can I say about 36? I'm willing to drive a 16, 17 hour round tripper up to Prince George every year. I missed last year because I was in Italy, but I'm willing to drive up there and spend 3 or 4 nights in an Airbnb and roll dice with a bunch of guys who I only get to see once every year or two. And of course, I'm talking about the Sky Marshal Cup. And so I get to head up there and do that. And it is a great time. And I've had some success. It's been dwindling as of late, but maybe I can recapture a bit. I'm going to be actually paired with Sky Marshal this time. We're going to be playing the common turn. And I know he's a KG veteran, so I will be leaning on his expertise and his ideas throughout. So that'll be fun. But what can you say about Global War 36? This is the magnum opus of historical board gaming, and for all the games they put out, this is the one that really draws the crowds. And it's the depth of the economics, the politics, the fact that it is a 3-sided game, I think, is the huge appeal. And, the common turn gets to play both sides against the middle if they want, right? They can have some fun with that. But the Allies and the Axis can't afford to let the Allies or the Axis, team up to team up with the common turn too much, because that will spell doom for them. So I think that's probably the greatest aspect of the game. The proxy wars are always fun as well, right? You got the Spanish Civil War is the main one that goes on that you can have some fun with. There are some great expansions. Turkey at War, I think, is one of my favorites. Stuff that goes on here in China can be very interesting. But the fact that it starts in 1936 really allows you to set the stage for what World War II is going to look like, what the invasion of Poland and the invasion of France are going to look like. You get to really set things up the way you want. So once again, you're not being played by the game, right? You get to decide so many things. The only downside of this game is that you need time, you need space, and you need people who either know how to play it, or at least one person who is really good at it, so that person can teach everybody else. And of course, that goes for any game, right? You want people who know how to play it. But with this game, you really need somebody there who's not partisan, right? They will just say, hey, folks, I'll just watch on the side and hand you some advice and some thoughts here and there. And so that's pretty much it. It's pretty much the only downside of this game is that you need to spend a couple or 3 days playing it. But I don't also consider that necessarily a downside, because then this becomes an event. This is not just a game. This is an immersive event and a situation that you can't just conjure up. You need to plan for it. You need to set aside time. And this game requires that. It requires that sort of dedication from people. And I hesitate to even call it a game. I think this is more of a reenactment, a simulation, if you will. It's the depth of it is so amazing. And I tell you, once you get into it, those of you who know, you know that it is a fantastic game. And I hope everybody who's watching this, that you get a chance to learn it and you get a chance to play it. That's Global War 36, and that is number 2 on the list of my HBG games, even though there's not a numbered list I've been doing. But number 1 is coming up in just a second. Well, I don't think it's a shock to anybody that this is my number one game, and specifically the Ultra 8.1 rules. 8.2, I think we might be on to now, but really the 8.1 is just great the way it is. So Global War 39, this was the precursor to 36, and it gave HBG an idea of where they could go and what people were hungry for. And they realized that this game was the one that was going to start everything rolling for them. I first played this game back in about 2013, 2014, and I was blown away by it. I did horribly at it because I still was thinking, Global 40, not realizing the demands that this game makes of you. And so I'd get together with 3 or 4 buddies and we'd play for 12 hours. And we weren't done, but it kind of, okay, it looks like these guys are going to win. And so we'd pack it up. And I'm not sure what to say about the game. It jumps right in 39, of course. But with Germany's double impulse and still having to defeat France and Poland, just like you do in 36, but you use what's on the board for the first impulse, but you build the second impulse. So again, you got choices to make, and I love that about these games. I think that's the one thing historical board gaming does better than anybody else, is that you write the script. You get to decide. So Germany, you've got enough stuff to take Paris and Warsaw. You don't have to build anything. You can just take them. If your dice are even a little bit below average, you'll still win these fights. So do you want to pour money into submarines? Do you want to pour money into air? Do you want to put it into ground pounders, right? And just take everything with authority. It's up to you. The convoy system, really simple. You got a boat in there at the end of Britain's turn and they got to pay that kind of money. It's pretty simple. The strict neutrals with their fleets really adds a wonderful measure of when you roll the dice, right? Norway's got a couple of coastal battleships. Where are they going to go? The French, right? When you take Paris, you got to roll for the French fleets. Just an amazing opportunity for the Axis to get a surprise fleet in the Med or with the Italians, for the Germans to have a fleet there. All of these French territories are on the board. Who will they go to? It's every game is different, right? And that's what I love about this. There's no script you have to follow. You can do whatever you want. Just figure it out as you go along. You can be reactionary and still win. You don't have to seize the initiative in order to win. You got communist China here. They're annoying, but they're not strong enough that Japan says, oh, we got to take care of them. And so they can actually grow and become a thorn. We, of course, have the Japanese sneak attack, right? The 3 sneak attacks they get to do. What a great concept, right? You get to go in, blast away, and then retreat, right? So your combat units all get a non-combat move after the Japanese sneak attack. So yeah, that's a wonderful time for the Japanese. And as devastating as that is, if America says, hey, we're going full Pacific, Japan's really got to watch out, right? So this game to me is the reason it's my favorite is, first of all, I can introduce anybody to it. You don't need to have quite the level of expertise you need in Global War 36. And it's very repetitious, right? Every round is very repetitious. You get your money, you buy your units, you put them on, or while you attack, and then you put them on at the end, right? Like it's very repetitious that way, but your options are almost limitless with most of these major powers of the things that you can purchase and how you can expand your sphere of influence. You can say, we're going to play defense for the first 3-4 rounds, and then we're going to go after them. Or you can say, no, we're going to be annoying right off the bat. Like you can, whatever strategy you want to employ, you can do that. With the Ultra rules also, we have incorporated every corner of the map is now part of the game. That's another thing I don't like about some games, is that the wasted space, is that certain territories don't mean anything. Well, not in this game. There are territories that might not be worth anything monetarily, but they are incredibly important. And Madagascar is one of them, right? So you're down here in South Africa building stuff, and the Japanese end up over here, and then they can send planes to hit here and land there if they can take that, right? So they can have their own little island carrier down in the south of the Indian Ocean for the Japanese or anybody else who wants it, right? So it could happen. All these islands out here, there's so many of them, and you can make so many incredible choices, and there's so many opportunities for you. It's a hoot. I love the miners, right? So you've got an Axis miner in Siam. You got pro-allied territories here and here. Got some over here. Then you got some pro-Axis, some minor Axis there. And then you've got, of course, your 3 here. You got Finland up north, right? All these things that just add so much flavor to the game and does not complicate it very much at all. So that is my favorite game right there. And more's the pity, I don't get to play it very often. But the thing that 39 would have that 36 does not is the ability for you to play it online. Right? You can set up your cameras and play someone. You can record your turn and send it. And, you don't need to be in constant contact. You can just do your turn and send it along, right? And just keep the game moving. So that's a strength this game has. And I very much appreciate it. And I do hope to be playing a game of it in not too long a time. Now you may be looking and saying, hey, wait a second. This looks an awful lot like this. Yes, it's the same map, of course. I just bought a smaller one, so it'll fit in a different play space that I have, so that if I need my big 4x8 play space, I can have that for something else, and then I can keep this game set up. I don't need to dismantle it. So that's why I did that. And you can see that the colors are different. It's a different material. And plus this other one here, my wife bought for me. I want to say in 2015, maybe 2016, she bought this for me. So it's been a long time, and I thought I'd get the new one. And it's the exact same map, so if you're thinking, hey, I've got the old map, I don't want to have to buy a new one, you don't. You can use the rules for Ultra 8.1. That's one of the things we were dedicated to, was not messing with the map at all. Leave it the same, and you can just apply the rules in the same manner, because the last thing you want to be doing is buying more and more and more maps because of a rule or two that got changed. Well, that's it, folks. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. There are some games I didn't talk about too much on this. Some other games that are really fun to play, but I thought I was getting a little long-winded, so I didn't want to go too crazy. But another game I really do enjoy is War Room. Haven't been able to play it for about 2 years now, so had some people asking me about it at the local game store, because that's where we usually play it, and so I might be able to get it off the shelf. But as you know, time, right? Time, and getting everybody together. So I also enjoy some Risk games like Risk 2210, and I like Risk Godstorm. I know some people don't. They think it's pretty campy, but I enjoy it. It's fun for a laugh. And Age of Mythology is another good one. That's from Eagle Games as well. So those are some good games that I consider war games, although Age of Mythology has a strong production system to it as well. All right, that's it for me gabbing away. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and yeah, please leave in the comments below maybe some games that you really enjoy, or maybe some that you've seen on my shelves, and you say, hey, how come you didn't take that one off the shelf? And maybe I can answer that. I'll give you a quick glance over here. War Room over there. Got some other things, some stuff hidden behind. But hey, as we always say here at the Hilltop Pillbox, no matter what game we're playing, whether it's the big gigantic ones that take hours and hours and hours and hours and days to play, or the small ones you can sit down and enjoy with friends after a meal, no matter what I say, no matter what you do, hey, hug your loved ones. Thank your friends for playing. And may those dice be with you.